Joining us now from Capitol Hill, the point man on tax reform and the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Congressman Kevin Brady of Texas. Mr. Chairman, always a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for being with us. We've got some specific questions about the plan, but just want to ask you broadly what we were just talking with Congressman Meadows about, and that is that you are certainly a fiscal conservative. There can be no denying that. But this plan at $1.5 trillion has got a lot to make up on the backside. Where do you pay for this program? How do you pull it off? And if the answer is by growing the economy, can you grow it enough to pay that off over a decade?
Yeah, it's a great question. The answer is growth and eliminating a lot of the special provisions and deductions in the tax code. You have to do both. We know certainly will grow the economy in a big way. That doesn't just grow revenues up here in Washington. It does at the state and local level as well. But that's not enough. You've got to cut out, the reason we're going with this simple postcard style approach and then eliminating a lot of the special provisions in the business side is to get back to a balanced budget over time. So you can't just do one or the other. We do both.
Do you believe that in good faith, Congressman, that you will be able to cover that hole, that the tax cut, with pure growth? Because that hasn't been the case historically.
So I just made the case that it is growth plus eliminating so many of the special provisions in the tax code so we can simplify it. The only way that you will lower the rates for everyone, families and that local small businesses, you got to get rid of a lot of the special loopholes and deductions and all that in the tax code. You have to do growth and streamline, simplify the code.
And let me ask you one more before I pass it around the table here. Congressman Meadows just said, quote, in our interview, the carried interest provision for hedge fund managers needs to go away. It's in there now. Do you share his concerns about that?
So in the bill, we double the holding period for those who will access carried interest. That means, you know, it's retained for that traditional real estate a group that's built that local strip center or that apartment building. But look, the hedge funds with the quick flips and all that will not be accessing this. So we think double the holding period really kind of puts it back to what the original intent was, which is to encourage local investment in our businesses.
Are you saying, Congressman, double the holding period from 1 year to 2 years from the normal capital?
Yes, sir.
Well, doubling the holding period for 2 years isn't going to solve your problem because private equity guys typically hold their investments for 5 years or more, so they're still going to get the benefit of this. And secondly, when you talk about local real estate developers, you're also throwing in there huge mega real estate developers, as the president was in his day, who are also going to get the benefit, continue to get the benefit of an unusually low tax rate. Isn't that correct?
Well, the way I see it is we want to encourage investment and growth. We want, I know you may not like those people who invest for longer periods. We think that's a good way to grow the economy. And by the way, you know, if those involved in these projects are working to grow their projects, make them succeed, do the sweat equity over time, 5 and 10 years, we want more of that type of investment.
Sure, I like the idea of people investing their money for the long term, but that's not what carried interest does. As you know, carried interest is 20% of the profits in return for investing nothing and getting a preferential tax rate on that.
So everyone in those projects are putting skin in the game. Some are working hard in sweat equity to make even greater gains for everyone involved. That's who they pay full income tax for their services and compensation like everyone else does. Over time, if they're making that investment grow in return for everybody, it is taxed at that rate. So look, I think doubling the holding period is very, very helpful here.
Chairman Heidi Przybyla of USA Today has a question for you.
Yeah. Hi, Chairman. Being a recovering budget nerd, I kind of relapsed last night and I reached out to some of my best budget sources. And here's what I found. This economic growth that you all are promising, it cannot happen unless the cuts occur at the same time. In fact, the Joint Committee on Taxation's economic model assumes that the type of tax cuts you're doing now that are not paid for could actually be a drag on economic growth. Can you please speak to that?
Yes, so the reason we move back toward a balanced budget is, one, there is substantial growth from this, but again, that won't do it. You have to simplify the code, eliminate so much of these special breaks on the business and the individual side as well. It's a combination of both of those that get you back to a balanced budget over time. That's why, you know, people complain, look, you're really simplifying the code dramatically. There's a lot of things that go. Not everyone's happy happy about that, but that is what sort of the tough choices you have to make, along with growth, to make sure this moves us toward a balanced budget.
But that's not what this bill does, because these are unfunded, right? You're taking out some loopholes, but you're still blowing a big hole in the budget. That's not like they did in '86.
I'm sorry, the audio went out for just a moment. Could you repeat that?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. But that is not what's happening here. This is still, regardless of these loopholes that you're closing, it's still a big blowhole in the deficit, and that is not what the model was in '86, for instance, when Reagan did it. This model that I'm speaking of still assumes that this could be a drag on economic growth because you're not doing the type of spending cuts, not just simplification in the code, but spending cuts.
Here, one, there are a number of models on growth, and I'm sure there'll be a healthy debate. That's a good thing. What we know is this dramatically grows the economy and revenues, not just here in Washington, but the state and local level as well. But you make a great point. Tax reform alone won't get us to a balanced budget. We have to have spending constraints along with that. And as I know, as House Republicans, we are turning toward how on welfare reform and how we tackle our entitlements in a way to save them. That's all part of the steps it takes to get us back into a fiscally responsible area. What I do know is you want to see continued deficits and debts, just stay with a slow growth economy like we saw the last 10 years. We know what that produced.
Congressman Donny Deutsch, nice to talk to you.
Yes, sir,
I'm
Donny.
sure you have many constituents in your district, hardworking people making $80 grand a year. They're going to see a $1,000 tax break. But how do you explain to them when probably the biggest problem this country has faced is the disparity between the wealthy and the middle class, when somebody like myself and other financially well-off people no longer will have an estate tax, no longer have the alternative minimum tax, where yes, the middle class is getting a very small tax break, but if the income disparity continues to grow, how do you explain that to that person?
Yeah, well, I think if you want to keep the income disparity, just stick with the current tax code. We know what that's already produced.
But
what
how do you explain
here,
the estate tax?
Yeah.
How do you justify? I'm sorry, go ahead, but just specifically those two and the AMT. Go ahead.
Just answer. So the AMT, that second level of taxation, hits a lot of middle income families and beyond. So like in New York City, for example, or in New York, it requires people to do their taxes twice and usually ends up tapping them for another $7,500. Yes, we do away with the AMT. We also clear out the underbrush that punishes people at whatever income level they're at in the code. In the death tax, by the way, you know, my belief, it isn't paid by the super wealthy. It's burdened by our family-owned farms and businesses who've worked a lifetime to build up a nest egg. That's where the damage is done. And by the way, eliminating that death tax creates 140,000 new jobs in America. So if we want to help get people back to work and get the economy going, stop punishing success in a lifetime of hard work. Double, triple taxation for all you do as a local business or farmer, it's just wrong.
We are just at the beginning of this process, as you know better than I, so I'm sure we'll be talking to you a bunch over the next few weeks and months. Congressman Kevin Brady, Chair of Ways and Means, thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Steve, on the estate tax.
Look, it's unbelievable because only people who have more than $11 million, die with more than $11 million, pay that estate tax. So when he starts talking about family farms and small business guys and all this stuff, it's just it's ridiculous. It's an illusion that these are the people who benefit. They don't benefit. They don't pay estate tax.
Right.
They pay a tiny bit.
I just want to ask you, Steve. I did this because this is one of the things that everybody who puts forward tax reform wants to avoid is the notion, which underlies all of this kind of legislation whenever it comes up. There are winners. There are losers. Who loses in this bill? Who are the losers here? The greatest points of political vulnerability for Republicans.
I think we don't know exactly. We know who the winners are, right? Business, wealthy people. Well, the middle class, it really depends on your facts and circumstances. For example, the way they've switched around the exemptions. If you're a family of fewer than 3 kids, you actually get a little bit of money. If you're a family of 3 kids or more, you actually lose a little bit of money. The high tax states, obviously, if you're a high tax state, and 40% of the people in places like New York and Connecticut file for itemized deductions of their state and local, they're going to be losers. So you have to, we need more analysis, we need more time, but in that middle class, the best you're going to do is get a few $100s, and the worst you're going to do is lose some money. And so this is not a bill about the middle-class taxpayer the way they keep saying it is on every Sunday talk show I watch.
You know, Steve, as a small family farmer, Donnie Deutsch resents your criticism of the estate tax that he benefits from. Still ahead on Morning Joe, in the words of Senator John McCain, it's time to wake up. The Arizona Republican is warning his own party about the politics surrounding the president.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.